Support for Donnybrook is provided in part by Design Air Heating and Cooling.
Seems fair to me. Well, if you don't know what fair is, you can't make it. Unacceptable by any reason.
Donnybrook is made possible by the support of the Betsy and Thomas Patterson Foundation and the members of 9PBS.
Well, I think the weather got to 40 degrees today, kind of a heat wave here in St. Louis. We'll take it, right? Welcome to another episode of Donnybrook. Good to have you with us, and we have lots to discuss on this edition. So let's first meet the panelists and then jump right into it. She's Wendy Wiese, the media veteran. Bill McClellan from the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. Sarah Fenske from St. Louis Magazine. And last week's provocateur who did too good a job, I think, Alvin Reid from the St. Louis American. Could you maybe dial it back a little bit?
Wait a minute. When I was going to say the first time I spoke that thank you, Charlie, for introducing us in the right order because I blew that sky high last week. So I watched the show and I was like, what? Huh? Like, wait. So anyway, yeah, the camera people were off and it was like,
and you changed the artwork on us.
It was just.
He just took over. He said, this will not stand. While Charlie is gone, changes must be made. And by the way, speaking of Charlie, I spoke to Barbara Washington, all of our dear friend. She said, please tell my sweetheart, Charlie Brennan. I said, I've never met sweetheart Charlie Brennan.
Thanks a lot.
No,
Thanks for standing up to me.
She said to tell you hello.
All right. Well, hello, Barbara Washington. Speaking of nature, she is a force of nature,
boy.
For sure. Hey, Alvin, I want to ask you about Governor Mike Kehoe. We can call him that now. No longer governor-elect. He's the new governor of the state of Missouri. And this week, he was sworn into office, big inaugural festivities. He said he's going to crack down on illegal immigration. He's going after people with task forces, people who have outstanding warrants. And the big suggestion in public safety is he wants to take over the St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department, the city police in the city of St. Louis, which in 2013 went back from state control to city control. This at a time when homicides are actually down in the city of St. Louis. Last year, 160. Actually, 2 years ago, 160. Last year was down to 150. So is this a time for the state to butt in?
Absolutely not. And in my estimation, that's all they're doing. The state of Missouri really doesn't want control of the St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department. They just want to cause havoc in St. Louis. They don't like us. They don't pretend to like us. And this is more of the same. As for Governor Kehoe, on Monday, he has ordered that the American flag be raised to full height instead of half staff because it's supposed to be 30 days like that for the late Jimmy Carter. But he says, with all due respect, we're going to raise it back up for the excitement of the new administration. He is focused on things that have absolutely nothing to do with the betterment of Missouri or any state in the union for that matter. It's just all bluster and it's nonsense. And somebody please stand up to him in the St. Louis metropolitan area.
Well, there's a lot of police officers who would like to go back to state control, Alvin. I mean, they look at the politicians that are leading the city right now, and Tashara Jones and Megan Green in particular, and they don't really trust them.
Okay.
And at least with the, a police, there used to be a police commissioners board, and that was something. They might not like us. I mean, I'm not privy to their private conversations, but I do think that St. Louis is a very important part when it comes to taxes generated and tourism. And I think that so they do have a horse in this race, if you will, the state government.
It doesn't really. I mean, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
but
I get it.
Could be good
I get it,
intention or whatever, but this is just some more Jefferson City nonsense.
Okay, but when I first moved here, ancient history, 1988, we had 140 homicides that year, and the population was 425,000. There is a public safety problem, and although murders went down, and I got to give everyone credit, murders went down, shootings went up, 674 shootings. It's way too many. I was in Phoenix this week. population 1.65 million, and they had fewer homicides than we did.
Okay, St. Louis is the only place in the world where less people get murdered and people have a problem with it.
No, I mean, 10 lives are 10 lives
We've got to do a lot better.
Okay.
Boston had 24.
All right, well then
Boston has doubled the population of our state, 24 homicides.
Okay, I get that.
10 lives saved is
it's
you know,
great.
that is great, but still it's not exactly 150 is not dancing in the streets.
But here's the thing, we are actually in a positive trajectory right now in St. Louis. You can't say that about the one police department in the state that's run by the state. That's the city of Kansas City. You know, across the nation, we're seeing drops in violent crime. St. Louis mirrors those trends, thank God. That hasn't been the case for Kansas City. I think if we were seeing the trends go in the wrong way, or if there was something happening where, you know, Mayor Tashara Jones wasn't giving the police what they need other than like something that they think they want. I mean, she hired a good chief. She's given him a long rope to do what he wants to do here. It seems like a crazy time for this to be at the very top of the governor's agenda.
Fair point. However, the salaries for the police officers are too low, and that's why not only does the Black Police Officer Association as well as the union want state control, they're too few. They went from 1,300 to 1,200, and now there are 900 officers. And I never see 2 officers in a vehicle.
And 700 officers are going to join the force because the state takes over.
I think if you increase the pay, you have a better chance of increasing the roles of the St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department.
The point that he made about making it easier to be a police officer than it is to be a criminal in his inaugural address. I think that resonates with some people.
No, it resonates with the people that will get him reelected, but it really has nothing to do with the city of St. Louis. All right, when the state says we got charged for the zoo and all that, they got our interest at heart.
Sarah, let me ask you about another issue plaguing the city of St. Louis, and this is a meeting yesterday, an aldermanic meeting, taking a look at snow removal in the last 10, 11 days in the city of St. Louis. 9-10 days after the big snowstorm, side streets still weren't plowed. Dave Glover on KMOX said that even the major thoroughfares in downtown St. Louis were not plowed. And residents are now complaining that because the salt hasn't been put down, they can't get mail. Their trash hasn't been picked up in 2 weeks. Could this be the Waterloo for Mayor Tashara Jones?
There is a lot of anger out there. I am hearing from a lot of people saying, this is it, I'm done. And, my fellow city dwellers and I think we put up with a fair amount living in the city. We like the culture in the city. A lot of people I know have voted for the mayor. They're in a very salty mood right now. It'll be interesting to see if they hold on to that anger as the weather changes, because eventually this is going to melt. But it has been incredibly frustrating. I think people understand that in the city of St. Louis, we don't plow the side streets. People accept that. They know that we're sort of in for a hassle when there's a snowstorm. What people did not anticipate is that the city would do such a terrible job with the secondaries. These are routes that they say that they will plow. And a full week after this storm, they hadn't gotten to many of them in neighborhoods that I frequent. Meanwhile, these side streets, because nobody even bothered to salt them, had turned into just ice skating rinks. There's this viral video now on Twitter where you can see a man skating quite confidently and quickly down his street in the Central West End. And at this hearing yesterday, I think so much of the anger ended up being intensified because the streets director was just sort of speaking calmly. Yeah, we had 12-hour shifts. Now we're back to 8-hour shifts. She said, we don't really have a plan to tackle the worst parts. We're just kind of doing it on a per request basis when people put in a ticket. I'll tell you, I have put in tickets saying, get the sheet of ice that is the entire road heading into my kid's school. And nothing has happened with that street. People are fed up.
In 1979 in Chicago, Mayor Bolandic, there was a huge snowstorm in January, and he didn't handle it very well, and he lost to Jane Byrne in the primary.
And the really amazing thing is, at least on social media, the people who are angriest are the ones who have been in her corner for a very, very long time, and some of the biggest cheerleaders in the city of St. Louis. So you're right, that does not bode well.
But isn't this just a weather event, Wendy? I mean,
it's bad. It's bad out in the county.
It is bad.
There's stretches of Lindbergh that are still like, oh my.
And look, MoDOT is a separate problem. We spent some time covering this at St. Louis Magazine. They are underfunded, and that needs to be fixed as well. But for the city not to get to the secondary streets after a full week and not apologize for that.
I talked to Brian Hausworth, who's with KSSZ in Columbia. He said the streets in Columbia, Missouri are just great, both the local ones as well as the state.
But I don't know that. All right, it snowed there, but I think they just got snow. I don't know that they got that snow,
Sleep.
ice.
That may be true,
Right,
and
yeah.
far be it from me to
Because my daughter's there.
I don't want to make any excuses for this mayor or any administration, but I'm going to harken back to the good old days once again. When I was first on KMOX, I was co-hosting a show with the late Ann Keefe, and our guest was Mayor Shamel. And we had just had a terrible snowstorm, and the streets weren't plowed. And I was asking him, well, why don't you plow the streets? And he goes, well, we really don't do that like you do in New England, Charlie. And to me, that's just been the St. Louis way since
You know what?
been
I had to
here.
learn that when I moved back because I had a friend who lived on Dresden. And after we had a stone, it's like a week later, I said, you need to call your alderperson and say, this is ridiculous. And he told me that story. Like, no, they don't plow the streets.
Yeah, but it's exactly like we were saying last week. It's the cumulative effect. It's the drip, drip, drip of issues. Because back when you had that conversation with Mayor Shamel, you didn't have the issues that people are facing today living in the city and doing everything they can to stay in the city.
Well, it was awkward last night. I tried to go to Zia's on the Hill, for dinner, and there on Edward Street, it was not only not plowed, but it was like a one-lane road. There were tire tracks here and tire tracks here, and I had to just keep going.
Sure.
Couldn't find a place to park.
And this is not the first time either that the hill has been covered with ice.
Yeah.
Hey, I want to ask you about your excellent column on Sunday, Bill. You took a look at Matt McCulloch, who used to be a St. Louis County police officer, but in October of 2023, he went to a trunk or treat party put on by a local PTO in Kirkwood. He was at the North Kirkwood Middle School. And he really went off the deep end. He said to the crowd, you're all going to die. He took his 9mm pistol. He fired 12 bullets into the air. Thankfully, he was tackled by parents. But then, a month later, a grand jury indicted him on 15 felony counts. This past week, he decided to plead guilty to 8 felonies. And now, Judge Ellen Roboto is going to decide his fate on March the 14th. What do you think should happen?
Well, it's a very interesting situation in that normally when there's a celebrity or the son of a celebrity, because of course Matthew is Bob McCullough's son, and Bob McCulloch was the prosecuting attorney for 27 years and a very hard law and order type guy. Usually when a celebrity or child of a celebrity gets in trouble, the judge can look at one of two things. Well, what happens to a non-celebrity in this instance? Like if it's a DUI or if it's a drug charge. But in this instance, I can't think of another precedent. It isn't like a lot of people have shot up the grade school party, and you go, wow, I don't know what to do on this. Yeah. And Matthew McCulloch took a blind plea. That is, there was no deal on the table. The only deal was they were dropping the armed criminal action charges, but he still faced endangering the welfare of a child and unlawful use of a weapon and making a terrorist threat. Serious charges. And the state recommended 3 years, which I thought was kind of a modest amount, especially there was no love lost between Wesley Bell and Bob McCulloch. And I think that the judge will, at the very least, give him 3 years. I don't think the judge can, I know they're not supposed to think of public reaction, but I don't think the judge can give him much of a break because people are irate, and this was around children. So, I don't think there'll be any real break given. I would think that she will give him at least 3 years, maybe a little more.
To me, 3 years feels like a decent punishment here. Like he's going to be doing some jail time. He's going to have time to deal with his mental health issues, which it seems clear there are in this case. I guess what I would wish is that we could extend that same courtesy if somebody doesn't have the family connections that he has. And what I liked about your column is I think you pointed out that Bob McCulloch was not a guy who would have done that himself. And I hope that this is something that maybe he can learn from. I know he's out of office, but that there's so many people who are dealing with bipolar disorder and mental health issues and commit criminal acts because of it. And to not have compassion for that, I think is a mistake that we've made as a society.
I think that there are certain, I mean, I think I see what you're saying, but I do think, I hate to generalize or paint with that broad a brush. I'm sure that he was, that he took a lot of these things into account over the many years that he was in the prosecutor's office. But when you think about the children, you know, as you said, Bill, you're all going to die. That's the kind of thing that parents have a difficult time erasing from those little memories. So 3 years, it almost seems a little, it seems a little lenient. So, you know, if you can get that work done.
Yeah, that's why they had to make a plea.
Sure.
You know, because you just cannot have your defendant with children testifying, and you know, are you still terrified today? Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. So he had to plead to it. This is awful.
No
case.
doubt about it.
Well, I just, as the resident Kirkwoodian here, we don't like guns. We don't like shooting. Okay, we've had our fill of it. And while the rest of the world can discuss bipolar and all that, come on, you're firing a gun with little kids around at the middle school. We've had enough guns and had enough violence in Kirkwood. 3 years, fine. You know what? Because I fear still that he will not do a day in jail. And until he is sentenced to jail time, I won't believe that he's going to get jail.
Well, and I don't
we'll
think
see.
it will, but I don't think it'll be shock time either. I think that it'll be hard time.
Okay.
We'll see.
And does 3 years mean 3 years, or does 3 years mean you get out in a year?
Well, I mean, if he was sentenced to 3 years and did a year and a half, I want him to. I don't want to sound mean-spirited here, but I want him to go to jail.
Okay. Hey, Wendy, I want to ask you about tobacco sales in St. Louis County. The St. Louis County Council has now made it possible so that if you own a business and you've been selling tobacco within 1,000 feet of a school, you can still continue to do that. And now, if you sell your business to another proprietor, he or she can also sell tobacco within 1,000 feet of a school, almost around the country now. Every city and town, I think Chicago, the limit is 500 feet. You can't sell within 500 feet, but around the country is kind of standard now. No tobacco sales within 1,000 feet of a school. What do you think? Should businesses buying into the grandfather clause be exempt from the rules?
I think that they should be able. I stopped smoking 22 years ago, and it was tough, but I'm glad I did it. But when I started, when I was 17, 18, wanting to look sophisticated, wanting to, you know, the whole package, it wasn't because of proximity to convenience stores. It was more about the magazines. I mean, I thought the whole Joe Camel thing was a little overdone, but it's the movie stars, it's the television stars. It's not proximity, and because they're pretty easy to find these days. It's a horrible thing. I wish I had never started, but human beings are human beings, and the forbidden fruit. But it's not going to be because, oh my, you know, we get our tape measure out and we start measuring. I don't think that's what it is.
I disagree. I think if any effort you can take to keep children away from beginning to smoke and vape and putting jaws of tobacco in their mouth, for that matter, you should be done. And I think 1,000 feet is reasonable. And I don't have a problem with it. That's all.
Well, I have sympathy for the convenience store owners who they make a lot of money off tobacco and they make a lot of money off alcohol. And suddenly we're being told you shouldn't drink any alcohol. You know, we've gone from, hey, a couple drinks a day is good for you, to now none. And of course, their third item is snack food. You know, so I mean, it's not like...
They might just have a card table, you know, where they used to have a store. They should just have a card table set up in the lot.
Yeah. So I think that we ought to allow them to make a living.
Yeah, I mean, Bill, you make a great point. Like, all of these vices are being taken away from us. But at the same time, like, this is the thing about young people. They will always find a new vice. Like, that's just like, a human wants to get high. And so, they've already moved on to vaping. And this is all over all these schools. And nobody can figure out how to stop them from doing it because it's so much easier to sneak than a cigarette. It's like we're kind of legislating the wrong problem here. This is a problem for people my age, not for the current 17-year-olds.
And I don't know about all former smokers, but I look at the vaping and I think eventually this is going to have health ramifications that are going to make, the things that we had to deal with look almost minimal.
I think that's Red Bull. I think 20 years
Really?
from now.
Oh yeah, it's like the chemicals. They're,
I don't drink it. I don't smoke. But that's the one I look at. They'll outlaw that 1,000 feet of a school too.
Yeah, the chemicals. Just those chemicals.
Those are the only two vices you don't like. That's what I understand.
That's right.
Hey, I want to go to you, Sarah, on a proposal to change St. Louis's government to not replace the mayor, but to add a city manager position. Someone who is hired as staff and will oversee the mechanics of running a government, as opposed to having a politician who's good at getting votes, trying to run the building division and pick up the trash and other assorted municipal activities. What do you think?
I appreciate that this proposal's on the table. I think people are fed up about some of the city services in St. Louis, and they're looking for an answer. Alderwoman Daniela Velasquez, smart person, appreciate she's putting this out there. I don't know that I see this as the panacea that a lot of other people seem to see it as. I've covered cities where they have city managers where they have problems, just the same as cities without them. It just kind of depends on the quality of the person doing it. To me, I don't see this as the game changer that a lot of people seem to think.
I have read this, and there's a city manager in Kirkwood, and other municipalities. And one of the things that I've read is that, like, city managers run into problems where there's budget problems because it becomes political, because they kind of have the, like, no, you just can't do this, and they give a fiduciary reason, and that's all there is to it. Well, if that's all you do, instead of, like you said, like, I'm not saying that every community flush with cash is doing well, but at the same time, it's more of a case where the city manager is more like, we can do this at the expense of that or whatever, as opposed to we don't have the money. All of this talk is nonsense. And if we had a city manager in the city of St. Louis, he would spend the first year saying all the things that are never, ever going to happen, no matter who supports them, north, south, east, or west. So he would be, or she would be, under fire immediately, even though it's supposed to be, kind of a generic job.
Yeah, it would end up not becoming generic in St. Louis. We'd find a way.
It's like the personnel director, right?
Right.
I mean, we're going to get this a professional, and we're not going to have politics.
Yeah.
And it's anything but.
That's true. But I always thought of the city managers in the smaller towns when I was reporting as like the building superintendent. You know what I mean? They were there. They knew who to call. They knew which streets were the worst. So
to me, it really makes sense in a small town where you can't afford to have a full-time mayor. The mayor's just coming in 8 hours a week, being paid to go to the meetings. Here, when we elect Tashara Jones, we're not just electing her. She's got a full-time chief of staff. She's got, a director of personnel. There's a giant apparatus here. It's not the mayor even doing the day-to-day the way it's set up currently.
And it's still not working.
Wendy, what do you think about a big announcement that Tony's restaurant, which has been in business for 80 years, I mean, it was on the map before the Gateway Arch. President Reagan dined there, so did both Presidents Bush. President Carter dined there, the Rolling Stones, Frank Sinatra, the list goes on and on. But James Bomarito, the chief cook and bottle washer, decided to close on the 15th of February so that people can have one last Valentine's Day there. It's kind of sad to see it go. Any analysis?
No, gosh, no. I mean, it is just the reality of the world. It's to everything there is a season, and I think they have had a glorious, glorious run. And I think a lot of times it's just perception. When Vince Bomarito passes on and goes to that big 5-star restaurant in the sky, whether or not they skip a beat, the perception is going to be, it's not the same. It's not the same. It's just not the same. And I think eventually that, with the incredible the prices involved. That's how they made, they had such a reputation. As you said, they had a global reputation. But today, I just think tastes change, the culture has changed, and I'm just glad that we had them for this time.
I'm glad I got to go.
Exactly.
Right, and that's
exactly.
Well, I mourned the loss of Kehoe's a lot more. I mean,
Sure.
I didn't go to Tony's.
Yeah.
But Kehoe's was a place to go. And
on Grand.
I thought.
And then the MetLife. Yeah.
I was at Tony's
where-
as recently as December 28th, and the halibut was fantastic. The service was fantastic. The crowd was good. I don't know. I suspect that the late Michael Neidorf at Centene gave them a good deal. But I also know that in that Centene Tower, for example, on the 4th floor, there's a terrific cafeteria. I mean, it's like on a cruise ship. And so if you're with Dowd, Bennett, or Bank of America or Centene, are you going to go to a restaurant or are you going to go to the building cafeteria?
Yeah.
I don't think that helped them too much.
Well, we don't have expense accounts anymore like we did back in the day either. You take
although the
clients-
Capitol Grill right across the street from him, I've been there once, and it's a booming place.
Yeah.
And very expensive.
It is.
So.
That's true.
Well, we wish the best to the Bomarito family, James in particular, and everybody. You have until February the 15th to go to the legendary Tony's restaurant. Let's go to the old mailbag and see what people had to say about last week's program. I'm sad the South Side has gotten so soft. Iced, snowy side streets are a way of life here at times in the winter. Always have been. You just deal with it, and yes, you dig your car out. That from South City, Sarah Held. Thank you, Sarah. We also heard from Larry Snopek of Alton, Illinois, who wrote, if Mayor Jones has been away from her job for 163 days, how have her travels benefited the city? Thanks, Larry. You can write us, care of 9PBS, 3655 Olive Street, 63108. Emails at donnybrook@9pbs.org, and on social media, use hashtag DonnybrookSTL. Call the 9 line, won't you, at 314-512-9094, and listen to us like I did last week in Arizona on your favorite podcast source. Stay tuned for the YouTube channel, rather the 9PBS YouTube channel. We call this program Last Call, and this week we'll be talking about possible changes in Illinois driving rules for senior citizens and what the heck happened to Jingle in O'Fallon, Missouri. Among our topics on Last Call. That's on the 9PBS YouTube channel. Thank you so much for joining us for this edition of Donnybrook. We'll see you again next week.
Donnybrook is made possible by the support of the Betsy and Thomas Patterson Foundation and the members of 9PBS.